They've entertained you. They've dazzled you. Perhaps they've even inspired you. But you don't know their names, and you don't know their faces. Stunt director, fight arranger, fight master, fight choreographer. Whatever you want to call him, the fencing master on a motion picture project selects the actions, creates the sequences, and directs the performance of the sword play. He trains the actors and sometimes even stunt doubles for them. Fight choreographers rarely get the pay that they're worth or the recognition they deserve. I submit for your consideration 6 of the most extraordinary swordsmen you've never heard of. Ever since Douglas Fairbanks Sr. thrilled audiences in the 1920 film The Mark of Zorro, the swashbuckler has been a favorite of generations of movie viewers and a Hollywood staple. You could say that there are 3 distinct periods of swashbuckling films. I call them the Fairbanks Period from about 1920 to 1935, the Flynn Period from 1935 to 1973, and the Hobbsian Period from 1973 to the current time. I call the earliest period the Fairbanks Period, not only because Douglas Fairbanks Sr. was the biggest star, but also because Fairbanks was the first one to bring in a fencing master to help with the fight scenes. Henry Uttenhove. Uttenhove was a fencing master in the Belgian army who emigrated to California and set up a salle d'armes where he trained numerous excellent fencers. Fairbanks brought him in not only to train himself, but anyone who was to cross blades with him on screen. Now, the style of the day was highly theatrical, what I call wackety-wackery. Fast, frantic, with a lot of blade bashing for no apparent reason. Full of sound and fury that didn't signify much. Maybe audiences were easier, less sophisticated, a little more fast and loose with their suspension of disbelief. Anyway, it seemed to work. In addition to the Mark of Zorro, Uttenhove worked with Fairbanks on Robin Hood in 1922, with Ramon Novarro and Scaramouche in 1923. The other noteworthy fight arranger of that period was Fred Cavens, who worked with Fairbanks on The Black Pirate in 1926 and The Iron Mask in 1929. But Cavens was about to take things up a level. Belgium-born Frederick Cavens was a graduate of the Military Institute of Physical Education and was a fencing master at the age of 21. He brought a completely new look to cinematic swordsmanship. Although he first introduced this style in the 1934 film Count of Monte Cristo with Robert Donat, it hit with the force of a tsunami with the 1935 blockbuster film Captain Blood, which also introduced the world to the dashing young Errol Flynn. Cavens' trademark duel on the beach between Flynn and Basil Rathbone is a timeless classic. Now, there's still a little bit of wackety-wackery, but mostly what we see in the Flynn period is actual fencing, just as it was practiced in salles d'armes all over the world. We sometimes see actors who have excellent fencing skills like José Ferrer and Basil Rathbone. Rathbone was known as one of the best fencers in Hollywood, having twice been the British Army champion. As the villain, his crisp, precise swordsmanship could make any fight look great, and he would appear with Flynn again in Robin Hood 1938, with Tyrone Power, another excellent fencer, in The Mark of Zorro 1940, and with Danny Kaye in The Court Jester 1956. Fred Cavens' son, Albert, was often his assistant, did some stunt doubling too, and he played Valvert, getting the worst of it in the 1950 version of Cyrano de Bergerac, starring José Ferrer. In addition to Cavens, 2 other popular fencing masters of this period were Jean Heremans and Ralph Faulkner. Also from Belgium, Heremans was 8 times national champion. He trained dancer Gene Kelly for his incredibly agile performance as D'Artagnan in the 1948 Three Musketeers, Stuart Granger and Mel Ferrer for their epic duel in Scaramouche of 1952, and Granger and James Mason for their saber duel in Prisoner of Zenda in 1952. He also trained Grace Kelly for her fencing lesson scene in the Swan, 1956. Ralph Faulkner took up fencing to help rehab a knee injury. In 1928, he won his first saber championship. He competed in saber in the Olympics in 1928 and in 1932. Now, he trained a great many fencers and actors, and stunt doubled for some of them, until his death at the age of 95. Most notably, he worked with Ronald Colman and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. in 1937's Prisoner of Zenda, and with Danny Kaye and Basil Rathbone for the 1956 comedy, The Court Jester. Regardless of the historical period of the story, or the particular weapons the actors were supposed to be using, the fencing was some combination of foil and saber, sometimes exaggerated for dramatic effect. This was fencing in a time before we had to distinguish between classical fencing and whatever silly shit they're allowing in the Olympics this week. So if you want to know what good fencing looks like, you'll get some idea of that in the Flynn Period films. Richard Lester's 1973 version of The Three Musketeers ushered in a new era of fight choreography with the work of William Hobbs. Hobbs's love of the sword and the stage developed very early, and he had a long and distinguished career in the theater and on screen. What distinguishes his work from me is his use of realism. He chose authentic weapons, corrected the historical period of the story, and he used them correctly, especially to reveal character. My favorite examples of Hobbs's work include three of my top 5 all-time favorite swashbucklers. The Four Musketeers, the fight between Michael York as D'Artagnan and Christopher Lee as Rochefort. Every fight in Ridley Scott's stunning masterpiece, The Duelists, and the brutal duel of honor between Liam Neeson and Tim Roth in Rob Roy. A cautionary tale, if there ever was one. Another important fight arranger during the Hobbsian period was Bob Anderson. As a fencer, Anderson represented Great Britain in the 1952 Olympics and the 1950 and 1953 World Championships. He was later named British national coach. He began a long and very successful career as a fight choreographer when Stanley Kubrick chose him to work on Barry Lyndon. Anderson has a lot of film credits. I think his best work can be seen in the kendo-inspired Star Wars, in which he also stunt-doubled Darth Vader, and in the comedy homage to swashbucklers, The Princess Bride. You may not know their names or their faces, but you know their work. And for a true swordsman, that's enough.